Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable and we no longer need to go to work to work. As a workplace dynamic strategist and the founder of Community, I draw back the curtains on my own business, the clients and projects that we deliver, along with tapping into the knowledge and insights from academics, business leaders and champions of change. I believe that our environments have the power to positively influence our behaviour and performance, inspiring our human potential. This program was made possible with the support from the Alistair Swain Foundation. To find out more, go to alistair-swain-foundation.org. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Work Life by Design. Now, it has been a very big, full and busy few weeks over at the Community Studio because we have been celebrating our 10th birthday. And with that, we've also been welcoming in some new clients to the business and we've been delivering some exciting new projects. So I've recently just been over in Perth, kicking off our Workplace Dynamics Blueprint with a team over there to help them reimagine what their new workplace is going to look like. Now, as part of that whole process, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is inviting leaders to approach this whole process with a completely fresh and new mindset. Now, one of the things that I learned from my time in the EO board was the concept of Shoshin. Now, Shoshin is actually a Buddhist term and it means to come at something with a beginner's mind. Now, a beginner's mind means that we're coming at things with curiosity. We're looking at it for the first time. We're looking at it with fresh eyes. We have no judgment. It's a completely new perspective. We have no preconceptions of what things are going to look like. And so when we're coming at this, it's like a child seeing something for the very first time. We have no idea what it is, and we have the opportunity to take a very fresh new look at it and start to understand things from a completely different perspective. Because when we do that, we can start to consider completely new and different opportunities and totally new possibilities. And so this is really important when we're starting to think about what we want to do when we're reimagining what our work environment is going to look like. This is an opportunity for you to start to think about what you want your people to feel, how you want them to experience that work environment. And you can come at that with a completely new and fresh perspective, but you have to come at it with this completely new beginner's mind. Now, one way that I start to do that is there is a tool that I found a few years ago through the Business Model Canvas, and it's called an employee empathy map. And you can use it to apply it to your work environment. So an employee empathy map really starts to look at what are the behaviours of our people, how we want to influence them, what we want them to feel, how we want them to think, and what their surroundings are going to look like and how they play a part in those behaviours. And if we take a step back and we think about the concept of empathy, empathy is really about imagining what it's like to walk in the shoes of somebody else. So putting yourself in the shoes of someone else and taking that perspective to think about how they might be experiencing an environment. And so in this particular case, we want to think about how our employees are experiencing our work environment and their overall feelings about the concept of work in itself. So what we're thinking about here is individual work styles, personality profiling, and perhaps even neurodiverse needs. And everybody has a different way of working. The way that I like to work is going to be very different to the way that you like to work. And even throughout the course of the day, depending on the tasks and activities and things that I need to do, I'm going to have different needs for how I need to be working throughout that day. And so by doing this exercise, you can start to consider what are some of the ways that you can begin to positively influence your employees' experience of the workplace and their whole experience of work. So if we think about the employee experience map, what it is it's a diagram and it takes a persona effectively or an avatar, or think about it in terms of your user group, so your people, and then we break it into 4 quadrants. And those 4 quadrants start to look at how we want people to see things, how we want them to hear, what we want them to think and feel, and what we want them to do. When we think about what we want them seeing, it's really about what do we want them to visualise as they enter your environment? How do we want them to experience that? So What are we thinking that they should be seeing? Is it we want them to see people collaborating? We want them to see people socializing. We want them to see different types of behavior that's occurring within that environment. But it can also be about materiality, colors, and aesthetics, which is typically what our workplace design is categorized as. What are the textures? What are the colors that we're seeing on the wall? What are the materials that are being utilized? Because all of these are giving people a sensory cue in terms of the brand aesthetic and the brand experience that we want people to experience when they're coming in. What is it like doing business with us? What are we seeing? And how do we then physically connect that back to an emotive experience or response that we're going to have within our bodies from visualizing and seeing that together? This is also another way that we can start to introduce our values as a physical form. So if we're thinking about what our values are in the organization, how are they going to show up in the way that we can see them? So is it about transparency, and can I then see into the office or across the office, or is there lots of glass so that I've got that? Is there ability for me to be able to go and concentrate, because that is something that is highly valued, that deep focused work. So are there places for me to be able to do that? And do I see that easily when I walk through a space? So thinking about all of those value touch points that you want to embed into your workplace, how am I seeing those when I'm walking through the environment or when I'm entering it for the first time? So the next one is around, how do you want them to think and feel? So when someone's coming into your environment, what do you want them to really be thinking and feeling? Is it that you want them to feel creative? Do you want them to feel comfortable? Do you want them to feel like they're welcome and at home? Do you want them to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of family? Or do you want to make them feel really energized? So all of these are ways that you can start to influence people's behavior when we start to think about how we want them to experience that space. So if we're wanting to have that sense of family within the work environment, we're going to be creating lots of places where people can come together and where they can gather. We're not necessarily going to be focusing on putting lots of people in their workstations. We're going to be thinking about how we can create a space that brings them together and encourages that sense of family. And think about, what does family mean to you? Does it mean it's about caring, it's about listening, it's about supporting one another? How do we then create spaces that encourage those types of behaviors to happen? But also, as we're thinking about this in the types of context of work, if we're thinking about how we want people to think and feel, it's about then how we can create some leadership and some rhythms and routines within our work environments as well, in our work days, that reinforce this idea that we want people to have, this empathy that we're showing towards the people that work in our environments. Enjoying the episode? I would love it if you would share this show with just one person who you think it would inspire. Just one. The more we can share the insights of what it takes to make work work, the closer we are to elevating everyone's experience of work. We then want to think about what we want them to be doing. So this is obviously where I think most people would start when they're thinking about designing a workplace, is what do we want people to do when they come in here? And as I've spoken about many, many times on the podcast before, when we're thinking about what people do in their workplace these days, I believe it's very, very different to what we did pre-pandemic, and work continues to evolve. And as organizations, we need to be taking a moment to think about, what is the purpose that we want our workplaces to fulfill? Now, some organizations are still very much about having people together in their work environment, and whether that's something that is driven by the business or it's driven by the individuals within that, there are organizations that do naturally gravitate to wanting to return to the office. And there are other organizations that I have seen that do naturally gravitate to working remotely. So understanding the way that your people work, having an understanding of what those ebbs and flows are and what that flexibility looks like, and then thinking about what are those types of activities that you want them doing when they are in the work environment. Are they doing that deep, concentrative, deep thinking work, and are there spaces that support that? Do we want them working aside each other in their workstations where they can collaborate informally and have informal conversations? Or do we want them to be really heavily engaged in active brainstorming, co-creation, really deep kind of brainstorming, problem-solving work? And therefore, what are we going to do to create an environment that supports that? So thinking about what we want people to do when they're in the workplace is really critical to understanding how we're going to create it. And then the fourth way that we are then influencing that behavior by understanding how our employees are going to experience the space is thinking about what we want them to hear. Now, when we come into a workplace, do we want them to hear banter and chatter and laughter, or do we want them to hear, quiet and concentration happening in the work area? So thinking about how we want them to experience the work environment is one way. And, we also need to be mindful of acoustics. We don't want it to feel too noisy because then it's going to influence people's ability to concentrate. They have a physical reaction to how there's too much noise and the impact that that's having on their focus and their cognitive function. But we also then, taking that from a work perspective, what are the types of conversations that we want people to overhear? What are the types of language that we want people to be using? What are the words that we think that they should be expressing? So this is a way that we can start to influence the way that our culture is starting to be formed, but then also how our people are then experiencing that culture. So taking an active moment to think about, what is it the way that we want people to be talking about this? What do we want to overhear people saying about the workplace, about the business, about each other? How do we want them talking about the business? And we can start to guide that. Now, when you go through this whole process, what we're doing there is we're starting to imagine how we would want someone to experience coming into our workplace or experiencing working within our business. And with that, we're often fronted with pain and gain. So they're the next two layers that we're going to start to look at. So what are the pains of our people within our business, and what is it that we can then do to gain? So what we start to do is look at, well, what are all of the challenges, the friction points, the problems that our employees are experiencing, and what are all the positive things? What are the gains that we're currently experiencing within our business? And then what we want to do is look at, well, how can we fix some of those pains? What can we do to transform or change or improve those challenges that our people are experiencing to make them positive experiences within our workplace? So just even sitting down and brainstorming that and thinking about those things. Now, this is a really great framework to start to reimagine and redesign not just your workplace, but your whole experience of work for your people. Now, you can do this in a number of different ways. You can do it across the entire organization, which is a great way to have more of a holistic view. But then you can also do it within departments, because each department is going to have a different way of working. They have different requirements. They're going to have different personality styles as a whole. And you can start to then define and design what the experience of work and the workplace looks like for those individual groups. Now, this is a great opportunity for doing this as a team, and you can start to co-create what that experience is, because you can invite your team members to contribute and be part of that. And it's a really nice way of bringing that whole team together and starting to imagine, what is it that we want to create in our new world of work? What I've also seen is this is a really great way to start to reset patterns of behavior, because what we're doing here is effectively redefining what our baseline is. And when we talk about values and behaviors, we talk about above the line behavior and below the line behavior. What we're doing here is we're really setting what our aspirational above the line behavior is going to look like, and then what we can do as a workplace and a work environment to start to support that. So it's a really great tool to start to shift and start to being more forward focused on what it is that we want to create within our work environments. Now, this is just one of the tools that I have incorporated into my book, The Next Workplace: Designing Dynamic Environments That Inspire Human Potential. And it's a really good tool that I use with my teams that I'm working with through the Workplace Dynamics Blueprint to really start to tease out what it is that we actually want to be creating. Because when I have a very clear picture of what these 4 areas look like, and we have a really clear empathy map around what it is that we want to create for the work environment, we can then start to embed all of that into the way that we design the space and how we create it. So if you haven't got a copy of my book yet, head over to melissamarsden.com.au/book, and you can check it out there. You can see inside the book. You can listen into some of the previous podcast episodes that we've put together from the book launch there as well. But if you do have any questions, or you want to reach out, or you're not really sure where to start, please hit the link in the show notes and you can book a call with me. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon and welcoming you back to the podcast again next week.